All right, so let's kind of move along with being pre-approved or pre-qualified. What is the difference when, let's say I go talk to a realtor and they say, are you pre-approved? What does that mean to everybody in this room? What does that mean to a normal person who doesn't know what any of that means?
Are you putting me in the category?
No. Yes.
No. It's a great question, and it's certainly kind of the first thing you're going to be asked when you go to an agent is having you pre-approved. And obviously they would like to, at least the good ones, will want to build a relationship, but they also want to know what condition your finances are. Are we, I don't want to say wasting the time, but before they're going to spend, how many hours do you normally spend with a client looking at houses from start to finish?
It all depends, but I would not really throw too much into that, but I would probably start thinking
Dates,
it's months,
yeah.
A lot of times, because you got to figure you start the process and your lease might not be up for 3 or 6 months, so we're in touch with you, we're sending you properties, we may start showing you some areas because you may have some different areas that you're considering. So that's like that could be a 3-month, 6-month process, and then once you find something, it's 45 days to settlement in most cases. So we're looking at some of these buyers. I mean, some of the buyers we're spending 9 months with. Some of them we're spending 3 months with, but that's a long time. We're spending
before he's going to want to do that, he's going to want to make sure that this is actually going to happen and you're in a condition to buy a home. So basically, the pre-approval, for all intents and purposes, it's a full mortgage application. The only thing that's missing is the actual property address. So it is a credit pull. We are going to, get your income, your assets, and kind of the full financial picture. We always joke that the mortgage application is kind of the full body cavity search. Unfortunately, but yeah, we want to know what the whole picture looks like because again, we want to know that up front and not when you've signed the contract and you're staring down the deadline of a 3-week closing. So we're going to go through all that, and we're going to get you, at least conditionally approved and said, okay, based on everything that you told us, you are pre-approved to purchase, and your numbers support your ability to qualify for a home of up to $400,000, $500,000, whatever the number may be. And we'll give you a letter that you can take to your agent, and then that way, when the agent takes you around, they kind of know, it helps set your price range because you hope it doesn't happen, but there's always kind of, we get people come in, oh yeah, I'm looking in this range, and then you get out there and you see what that range actually buys you or doesn't buy you. And then
I think, I believe that process is free with credit.
Yes, absolutely.
So I would say just in seeing the big picture and working with all the parties involved in the transaction, one, it's free, but in my personal opinion, it's leverage. Because if you go out to the market with Jeremy and you're already pre-approved, as we talked about earlier, especially if you get into stronger markets where the average turnaround time is 12 to 22 days and the house is gone. Having that pre-approval letter, if you're going to a seller, if I'm selling a home, I am way more likely to focus my attention on this group, on this person, or these people and their agent, as opposed to someone that doesn't have it. Because I know that I'm going to close and be done with the process in 30 to 45 days, as opposed to the 3, 6 months, 9 months that Jeremy alluded to earlier.
Yeah, I think it also saves you time too, because we as agents don't want to set our clients up for failure. I mean, if you come in and you're considering purchasing something for $400,000 because you saw something on the internet and it looks good and you think that you could qualify because you did some calculations on the internet with some different type of calculators, but then you go through the pre-approval process and you find out that it's less than that, then if we have been spending our time sending you, showing you $400,000 properties, or you considering those, and then maybe your budget's a little bit different than that, there's a big difference from what you can get for $400 and $350 or $450 and $500. So we don't want to set our clients up for failure either. We don't want you to start looking in a range, and quite honestly, we really can't help you if the range is 0 to whatever. Right? It's really hard to do that. Because part of our process is to help you identify what your needs are and to help you save time and energy and kind of focus on what you're looking for. And that all starts with the pre-approval. And it's a very simple process. You'd be surprised. It takes like a couple minutes.
10 minutes. 15 minutes.
Yeah, they're very, very quick. And that, like they said, that having that piece of paper there gives you a lot of leverage. So if you are in the market, just go talk to a realtor, go talk to your lender, talk to the credit union.
As agents, we won't even present an offer to our sellers without the pre-approval. So if it comes in without a pre-approval, we say, where's the pre-approval? And they say, oh, they're working on it. Well, we'll present it once we have it.
Question is back, sir.
Wait, sorry, so did you say that it's a really quick process, or I thought I heard that it was a very expensive process? It's like a full mortgage application except, yeah.
It is both. So the application is the most extensive of any application compared to a car loan or a credit card or anything like that. So, I mean, you're truly throwing everything out there. But the process itself, I mean, 90% plus of our members will apply online at their own convenience. So they go through the whole thing online. Our loan officer then will get it, we'll review it, and then they'll talk on the phone, just answer any questions. But really, once we have the application in 10 minutes, if everything looks good, we can have you the letter over email.
All right, well, let's keep moving right along, because I know everybody in here wants to know more information about finding your house, submitting the offer, and getting it ratified. I know that's a lot of information I just said. So let's start with this. Since this is a room of primarily first-time home buyers, can you walk us through the process? I know we've already kind of touched on it, of finding the house, submitting the offer, and then getting it ratified. I know it's three. So find a house, submit an offer, and then getting it ratified.
Why don't you start that?
Yeah.
I'll chime in.
So finding the house, first of all, first thing you want to do, we just talked about the pre-approval process. Second thing you want to do is you want to select an agent. The third thing you want to do is you want to sit down with the agent and what we call our buyer consultation. We bring all of our buyers into our office and we'll meet them at a location that's easy for them. And we will talk about what their needs are. We'll talk about where they're looking, what are the areas that they're looking at, what's important to them in a home, what's important to them in a real estate agent, what would make this experience really enjoyable for them. Have they ever had a negative experience? What does that look like? We ask a ton of questions. It's a needs analysis. And then what we do is we set you up on the MLS. The Home Advantage program is great for that, but we also set you up on an MLS search. And we start identifying properties in the market that are within your search criteria. Once we do that, we'll then start, the next process is to get out and start taking a look, going on a tour, and identifying 5 to 7 properties that you would consider purchasing, just based upon what you've seen from pictures and the location and everything. From there, once you find something that you like, and initially it's just a shopping process, you're just trying to identify what you like, what you don't like, and then we'll take the offer and we'll present it to the seller's agent, who will then go and present the offer to the sellers. The sellers will then come back and they will either accept, counter, or reject the offer. If they accept it, great. If they counter it, then you have the ability at that point in time to say you want to proceed, not proceed, or counter the counter. And then it's a little bit of a back and forth process. And and then eventually everybody comes to an agreement and everybody signs off on any changes that were made. Once everything has been signed off on, it becomes what we just refer to as a ratified contract. That then gets submitted to the lender. The lender starts working with the title company, and everyone starts working together at that point in time. In most contracts, you'll have what's called inspection contingencies, where you're going to do a home inspection, you're going to do a radon inspection, termite inspection, well and septic if you're in areas that have well and septic. If you have a wood-burning fireplace, you want to do a chimney inspection. So we're there to help you through scheduling those, and then also negotiating any repair requests. The repairs are also part of the contract, so we have to sign off on all those as well. The seller has to agree or disagree to fix certain items. You have to agree to move forward. If you don't agree, you can get out of the contract. If you do agree, you're still proceeding. And during that time, you're working with your lender for what's called written financing application and commitment. And the title company is making sure that there are no liens against the property, anything that could affect the property from transferring to you at the time of settlement. And then once you're done the inspections, it's kind of like you're waiting, and the appraisal is going to be done through the lender. And it's a lot going on there, right? But it should be a pretty seamless process as long as you have an agent on your side that knows what they're doing.
I mean, what you mentioned about the strategy that you come up with, and putting forth your offer, and obviously putting your best foot forward, and yet trying to leave some wiggle room. I mean, I always think about it. You know, there's only so many levers you can really pull to make your offer stand out, and it's important when you're dealing in a hot housing market. And you know, some of these places when there's not a lot of inventory, I mean, they go on the market, and within 24 hours they've got multiple offers that are
That
made.
happened
So,
in my house.
is that right?
Yeah, I was shocked when that happened. I went, oh my gosh, really? And my realtor was like, let's go.
And it's tough because at that point you've already fallen in love with
Yeah,
it, right?
absolutely.
And you're already picking the color of the paint,
Paint,
the carpet.
curtains.
But I always think, you know, when you're trying to think what are those levers, I mean, it's how much, obviously, how soon, and how likely are kind of the big three areas. So how much, what's your total offer price, but also how much are you willing to put down in what's called an earnest money deposit. You talked about that $10,000 example earlier. When you throw something, when you put an EMD, or earnest money deposit, you're kind of putting that out there and saying, okay, if this doesn't close the way we promised, you're at risk of losing that. The more you put down, the more skin in the game you have, the more attractive that is to a seller. How soon? So I think for most sellers, you know, sooner would be better, right? Now, obviously, if they have timing on their end in terms of getting out of the house, that's not always the case. But in most cases, the sooner, the fewer things that can actually go wrong, the more attractive that is. So in a perfect world, an agent would love to go in there and write a 15-day contract. And then, of course, you know, us the lenders, always the last to know, and then we're trying to make a miracle happen. Never happens, right? But so that's the how soon. And then the how likely. An all-cash offer, very likely to happen, right? Nothing can really go wrong there. You've got the cash, it's documented, and it's just kind of set the date, and let's make this happen. 100% financing, no reserves, you know, not much wiggle room for the appraisal to maybe come back a little bit lower. Not quite as likely. So that's the other end of the spectrum. So if you're a seller and you're picking between two offers that are identical, with the exception that one is all cash and one is he's got a pre-approval letter, but it looks like there's not a lot of wiggle room, which one are you going to take? You're going to take the one that's most likely to happen. On that same topic, you touched on contingencies. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and I think a lot of people just kind of nod their head, but then what do you mean by contingency? Contingencies are basically almost you can think about them like a get-out-of-jail-free card almost. So when I said before, you put your EMD down, that's what you could lose if you don't close, except for these documented contingencies, appraisal contingencies. If the property does not appraise for the value that we agreed upon, then I get a get-out-of-jail-free card, and I kind of get my EMD back. Financing contingency. If I don't qualify for the loan, I get my EMD back. But anything that happens, there's a couple other ones. Home inspection was the other, and you can kind of write in whatever you want. But the more contingencies that you put in there, the more conditions, and the more the seller might just say, well, hey, I'm going to take this other one because it looks like a slam dunk. So home sale contingency, that's a big one, right? If you can't sell your own place, then you can get your EMD back. And that's risky because what do I need in order to sell my place? I need a buyer who can qualify and buy mine. So you get this whole chain that works together where all it takes is one person 4 removed from you to not qualify for their loan, and the whole thing falls apart. So the fewer the contingencies, the more ironclad the contract is. So again, how much, how soon, how likely? Think about that. And obviously, your agent's going to be the one to bring the years of experience and say, okay, they're going to get their read from talking to the seller's agents, and I think this is what's going to work for us. But those are kind of the levers that are out there.
All right, so assuming that we, you know, made the offers, everything's ratified, everything's good, let's talk about closing costs. I know you mentioned closing costs earlier, but does everybody know how much that could potentially be? Do you know how to calculate it?
I mean, it's going to vary. So basically what you want to do, and whether you're getting again, going back to the information, not to beat that to death, but during this process of going through all that, your good agents or your good lenders are going to give you a couple options. You go to that title company, whether it's me, whether it's XYZ, whether it's 3, 5, 10, and you want everything what's called basically a prelim HUD or a prelim CD. And you want them to outline all the closing costs. Now, it can be somewhat misleading because a lot of times your true closing costs on a purchase, anywhere from $400 to $1,200 true closing costs. Now, some will line item that to FedEx fees and wires. We do it as one lump sum. In working with the credit union and preferred agents, we do tend to go towards that $400 to $600 mark as opposed to the higher mark. But the other things you need to worry about or watch for is the stuff that you're not probably going to see until closing. So the recordation tax, for example, that I talked about earlier, that's what it costs to record that property, whether it's in the state or the county or the city. Most people don't see that until you approach closing. They say, I thought I needed $10,000 on the table, why is it 16? Well, the important thing to remember is those recordation taxes, both county and state, regardless of lender, regardless of agent, regardless of title company, they're the same. The county and state gets their money somehow, some way. So the closing costs are going to vary, so it's a tough question to ask. But along with these guys, even if you didn't go with the credit union or with Jeremy or with our title company, float it by us. We'll have good teams, and at a minimum, they're going to give you good advice. And it doesn't hurt to compare. Again, it's free. It's just information. And you're going to see what the market dictates. I mean, sometimes going with a company that's $200 or $300 lower is not necessarily the best, because in a situation like this, we've all worked together. The process flow is going to be seamless because we're talking about hundreds of transactions over how many years. So, hard question to answer.
I think they have a sample illustrative example in your packet that has DC, Maryland, Virginia. Now, the important thing to note is that a lot of the costs are based on loan amount or sales price. So I think it gives you, a couple different levels of saying, okay, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000. But you can go on our website at any time and plug in some numbers, and you'll get a very close estimate in terms of what it's going to cost. The other thing to touch on is what Sean said about, the number is going to be a big number, but to his point, 80 to 90% of it doesn't matter who you go with. So when you're looking at shopping different lenders, make sure you just focus on the one small part that the lender itself controls. In our case, we charge a flat fee, flat origination fee. Many other lenders out there charge a percentage of the loan amount. So in this area, that can get pretty high. So, we're going to have that democratic view of, hey, all members are equal. So, we don't want to penalize one over the other. So it's kind of a value add fee that way. But people tend to lose that because they look at the whole number and say, well, this lender's giving me an estimate of this. And the reality is, if it's a county tax, it's a county tax. It doesn't matter.
And Jeremy alluded to earlier, ask questions. If you see a $50 courier fee or a $50 document storage fee, by law in the state of Maryland, for example, I have to keep records of every file for 5 to 7 years. I've got to keep them anyway, so why am I charging you? It's just the miscellaneous fees thing. Just ask questions until you're happy, until you feel that it's fair. Your loan officer and your agent will review it. And, a lot of times if you compare, you usually get numbers 2, 3, 5 companies if you wanted to. You're going to see who's out on top or ahead, and then by their recommendation is usually what I would advise going forward.
Question in the back?
Yes, do you only loan in the tri-state area, or do you mean all 50 states?
All 50. That's some, I would say, misconception, but it's one that we've been working hard to over the last 4 years since we brought this business in-house. Get the message out that people think of us as, I came to you because you were down the hall here on the hill, so you must be in DC, Maryland, Virginia. As a federal credit union, we can lend in all 50 and do.
All right, well, we talked about closing process and everything that we need to be aware of, but not to sound negative, but what are the most common deal killers that kill that mortgage for that owner?
If you're talking about just the mortgage itself, I mean, the biggest one I think that we see, or at least have seen over the last couple of years, usually relates to condos, the property in general. I mean, it's tough. We don't see quite as many condo issues this year and this past year, so it's gotten a little bit better. But the one thing people should know in this area about condominiums, since we have so many of them here, is that if you're buying into a condo, I guess it's almost like marrying into a family. You're at the, you can be affected by those other homeowners in that project that have absolutely nothing to do with you. So every condominium project gets reviewed outside of your loan. And if Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who are on the back end buying the large share of a lot of mortgages in this country, deem your project and that development to be what they call non-warrantable because, one example, let's say the condo association, the homeowner association didn't have adequate reserves. Well, that project isn't going to be warrantable, and a lot of lenders aren't going to lend on non-warrantable. Now we do, we say there are very few hard stops and non-starters when it comes to properties, but there are certain things that we won't do, which we can talk offline if you have any questions. But point being is we talk to people, they say, well, what does that have to do with me? You know, that there's no reserve in the association. Well, if something happens and there's vandalism or a storm or something where your common areas are destroyed, if there's no money to repair that, that's going to affect the saleability and resale price of your unit. So it does matter. When 60% of the condo association or development is vacant, well, that's going to have to be a lot less appealing to a potential buyer, and it's going to affect the value than if it was a vibrant owner-occupied community. So things like that, and it's the hardest message we have to deliver, which is you're really well qualified, your loan is perfect. The problem isn't with you, it's with the property itself. So that's one that we see. The other one, low appraisals. I think in school you're taught that the value is what the market will pay, right? That's one of the basic concepts of economics, except when it comes to a real estate transaction. You can have a buyer and a seller agree that, hey, I will pay you $400,000 for this house. And the seller says, great, we have a deal. They shake on it, they sign the contract. Good to go, right? Unfortunately not. So we're going to get an appraisal. Any lender's going to get an appraisal on every purchase transaction, and that's going to be backed by comparable sales in the market, because the reality is that buyer and seller could be, could have their own motivations or reasons. And if the appraisal comes back and it's only worth $350 instead of $400, the lender's going to use the lower of the two. So it's what usually happens. We talked about an appraisal contingency. In that case, you would usually have the right to renegotiate as the buyer, but it's an awkward situation for all involved. And the seller can say, you know what, I don't buy that appraisal. I think I can get $400 for it. So we're willing, we're standing firm. Now, as a buyer, you talk about talking with your agent. The agent may say, well, hey, I tend to think he's right. So if you really want the house, go ahead and move forward. But from a lender standpoint, we're going to use that $350. So again, that's another one that we see.
What is something that's pretty common among condominiums in DC, or in general, that maybe a buyer might not be aware of?
All those things. But people oftentimes just think about the purchase price and the cost of the mortgage. They forget to throw in that extra couple hundred. And when you're comparing and you've got looking at a couple different properties, one of which is a condo, oftentimes they forget to add in that, and they're looking at all things equal, and they're not. So, good point. Thank you.
All right. So, do we have any questions in the room so far? We just have a few more minutes left. I know we're not going to get to everybody's questions, but you can always talk with us offline or connect with us after we're done tonight as well. So, I want to talk about one more thing. What does everyone in the room need to know about foreclosures or short sales?
I guess the biggest thing is just understand that you're dealing with, there's somebody else involved in those cases. In many cases, a bank or another financial institution that has to approve the sale as well as. So it's not just quite as simple as finding a willing seller and a willing buyer. The other thing is obviously, I think you just have to be aware of what you potentially are getting, and not all foreclosed properties were taken care of in the same condition. I think with an event like that, it can be very tough, very emotional for people. So you would like to think that everybody, of course, treats the home with care and respect, but that's not always the case. So just be aware of when you're buying anything.
I'll chime in. A lot of foreclosures will say sold as is. That means as is. So what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
So just be
I
aware.
think everybody comes into it thinking, oh, they're going to get the steal of the century,
Right.
because it's a foreclosure. And the reality is, if you lowball it, the bank's probably not going to agree to that anyway. So I don't know if you deal with a lot of them, but
I would just say the banks have gotten a lot more market savvy. I would say over the last 3 to 5 years, where they're setting prices to sell the property for that value. They're very close to what they're selling for. There's not, gone are the days where you can pick up a foreclosure for like 20% off the market value. Properties are sold as is. Foreclosure, the bank owns the property. They're pretty responsive within 48, 72 hours of getting you a response on your offer. But I think they're they're the sales that you don't have as much disclosure as you would like, because the banks aren't required to disclose information about the property, because a lot of them have never seen it, they've never lived in it, they don't really know what happened prior to. That could be a little bit more of a touchy sale. Then the short sale is when the seller is upside down on their mortgage, say they're $50,000 upside down, and they're trying to sell the property. That's the short part of it. The long part of it is that it's going to take quite some time, because sometimes they have one mortgage company or two mortgage companies, and then they have to work something out in order to agree to the sale. A lot of times you'll see in remarks online, you'll see subject to third-party approval or bank approval required. Those short sales and foreclosure will be sold as is. What I've seen a lot of is on the short sale side of things. A lot of times buyers are staying away from short sales because of how long they're taking. So you see a lot of listing agents that are representing the sellers just continuing to reduce the price, and then somebody submits an offer. The offer gets accepted by the seller because the seller is relying on the third party, the bank, to accept the offer. And then the bank comes back 3-6 months later and says, thanks for the offer, but we need $20,000, $30,000 more because this was priced below the market. So short sales are tough, and I think they should be called long sales because they do take a long time. And then you have auction properties, which I would be very cautious on, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. A lot of these auction properties have 4.5% buyer premiums, meaning that you will pay an additional 4.5% at the time of settlement of the sales price, which can be a lot of money. So you got to be cautious of that. And then the only other thing I mentioned about these sales is that some financing, some of these properties cannot be financed because they're in such bad shape. And they may look like a good deal on paper. You go out to see them, there's some mold, there's some water damage, there's roof leaking. An appraiser that goes in from the bank is going to have what's called subject to conditions. And just know that these aren't going to be fixed. So it's terrible to get that far along in the process where you spend money on an appraisal and money on some inspections to find out that you're not going to be able to get the loan because of the condition of the property. So if you're working with an agent, work with somebody who's knowledgeable about the foreclosure short sale process, what to look for, what's going to pass, what's not going to pass, certain types of, in order to get the loan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to experience, guys. Everybody has the cousin or the high school buddy that's the real estate agent. If you're doing the short sales, and that's no offense because we all do, but if you're doing the short sales, if you're looking at the auction stuff, they're absolutely right. Work with someone that has experience on every level. Because from the legal perspective, once it gets to me, I can only do so much of it. So that stack of paper that we have to go through to make sure that we're legally conveying that property into your name the right way, and hopefully the first time, it all starts with these guys up front. And if, regardless if it's not these two, you have to know what you're doing, because I've seen some absolute nightmares, and you get locked in, especially the auction stuff. I would say that the number one question to ask before you even read one document is how the deed will convey. So a lot of times with the auction properties, what we're seeing actually a lot lately is they'll do a certain type of deed that basically says, well, we don't even know if we own it, so we're going to convey it in this style or this format of a deed, which means, guess what, if you're doing it for investment purposes or you're selling it 3 to 5 years, you might not be able to sell it. Because if I'm not going in there with a deed that fully conveys into my name, I'm probably not going to buy it. So just, a lot of agents that I work with will actually send me addresses if they have clients that are looking at short sales or auction properties, and I'll actually run the title search. We have in-house abstractors who turn around in 24 to 48 hours. I can tell you everything that's on the chain of title in 48 hours. So I can tell you if they have $50,000 in tax liens, I can tell you if they really own it, I can tell you if they own the title. And then there's going to be some where this looks okay, that's the advice of your agent or loan officer, and this one, stay away from it. And, that's probably the best method. You're going to find out everything going into the property before you buy it, because it's hard to get out of it once you're in it.
And just in case everybody doesn't know the what chain of title means. That's a very important part of the transaction is when you apply for the loan and when we're processing everything. One of the biggest things we're going to do is do a title search to see what the ownership actually was. Especially when a property's changed hands a number of times, everything wasn't done exactly by the book, and there could be what they call a cloud on title. And you have to be able to, ensure that proper ownership is conveyed. So that's another one of those deal killers, or I'd say probably deal delayers more than anything, because there's only so much that we can do, and in some cases there's only so much you can do. I mean, there could be 10 years ago, somebody forgot to release a lien, and that lender is no longer in business because 50% of the lenders from the early 2000s are not in business anymore. Trying to clear all that up can take weeks, months even. So
We had one 6 months ago that we were doing the transaction, and once we pulled the entire chain of title, they had actually been sold the wrong property. So there was a lot that initially had one house, subdivided and built two. Somehow the legal descriptions got mixed up. We got a week from closing, and I said, well, here's the problem, you're buying your neighbor's house.
which one's the nicer one?
Yeah, I didn't do the first deal. We weren't involved, but you would be surprised what you see. And having that information at your fingertips prior to is very important. We'll usually have the title search back very early in the process as you're going through the process with them. So we usually know what surprises or speed bumps are going to come up with the short sales, with the foreclosures, the auction properties. There's obviously more involved. It's a little more time consuming, but they are doable. They are common. Some of the deals are good, but it's just a matter of starting the process a little bit earlier.
I just want to say, I think the common theme here that I'm recognizing, just sitting up here talking with these guys, is that this is a team effort, and this is not something that you do with your own. You get together with the reputable professionals that know what they're doing, that know what they're talking about, know what they're looking for, and then hopefully they're all working on the same team, like us up here, in order to put you in the best position possible, so that nothing catastrophic happens to you, or you have one of those horror stories happen to you. I think it's really a lot of people on the surface just think like, oh, I'm going to go buy a home. But there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that I think that we've addressed this evening that requires a team effort.
And I would second that just from the standpoint of the team. I mean, you've probably seen this too. You work with so many different types of agents, the good ones, the bad ones, and when you're shopping, I mean, obviously you want to look for somebody you can trust, but don't be kind of fooled by the one that just is a yeller and just says, oh, I'm going to stick it to your lender, I'm going to make sure this because I'm so tough on your behalf, which is great, except it just ends up more often than not just causing a lot of headache back and forth. The best realtors that are worth their weight in gold are the level-headed ones, the ones that have seen it all, the ones that will, things will pop up. Something shows up in the title that you never expected. Everything that seems like a slam dunk rarely is. And the best advisors you can have are the ones that just keep their cool and say, okay, you know what? How are we going to figure out a solution? How are we going to work with the lender? How are we going to work with the title company? Lay it out, what does it mean? And then they'll work with you to get you where you need to go, as opposed to prodding themselves on just yelling.
Yeah. And there are things that are going to pop up, and it's, a lot of times it is a smooth roller coaster ride, but sometimes it's a bumpy ride. And I tell my clients that all the time up front, because there's so many different people that are involved in a transaction, from inspectors to sellers to buyers to agents to lenders to title company, you name it. I mean, there's a bunch of people. So if you're not working with a good team, then it's going to be a little bit of a bumpier ride.
So I was going to say, hold on tight, it could be a bumpy ride, right? Well, thank you for that last little bit. I just want to open up to questions for just a couple minutes. And I know that there are lots of questions that probably weren't addressed. So please come up to us afterwards and we can follow with emails. And my last little encouragement is to fill out the evaluation forms, please. We would greatly appreciate it, and we'll get you entered into a raffle for the Amazon gift card. So, are there any questions in the room on Facebook Live? Yes.
Okay, so the question is, if I have been pre-approved for a loan, how long do I have to purchase a home? Is there a deadline?
excellent question. So generally, pre-approvals, at least ours, are good for a solid 90 days. Can extend that, but even after 90 days, we can refresh it in a matter of 5 minutes or so. It's just a new credit pull to give you another 90 days. So obviously, we want to base it on current information, and if something, the caveat is always if something major has changed. In other words, if you have left your job and you haven't found anything new, that's going to change things. But assuming nothing has changed, you're good for 3 months, and then we can just keep refreshing it as long as you still qualify.
Any other questions? Yes, sir, in back.
So you said that you do lending in all 50 states, but is there a network of realtors in all 50 states as well, or just?
So currently, there are some states that the Home Advantage program is not in. I think it's 36 that they are. It's, most of the East Coast is covered. California is covered, I believe, and most of the bigger ones. There are some that are in the Midwest and the South that are not. There are also some states that prohibit the rebate of commission. There's like 2% or 3 that don't allow you to actually get a credit back. But yeah, I mean, that's something that we can look at your specific situation. But for the most part, we've got good coverage.
Question, yes.
So what is the huge benefit with going with you all as opposed to a traditional bank?
Can I answer that for you?
Yeah, please.
But it hasn't worked with all. One is the process. So what you see nowadays, especially in the microwave society that we live in technology, you're big box lenders, if you will. I'm not naming names because we work with them. But you're going to work with probably anywhere from 10 to 12 people just on the lending side alone. It's in a very assembly-like process. Whereas the credit union, I don't want to get into pay structure, but their loan officers aren't commission driven, right? So the service is going to be different in that aspect because they're not going to try to sell you something that you don't need, because they're going to make the same regardless. They're going to spend the time with you. I think the member retention on loans, we were just talking about this before, is we closed parents and then 5, 6, 7 years later closed their children after college. So I'd say service is number one. And second, if you look across the board, credit unions, for that exact reason of not being commission-based on loan officers, are typically anywhere to a quarter to a half a point lower. The program Jeff was mentioning earlier that he was modest on about the zero down. I would tell you in, 100 to 150 transactions a month, there's probably 2, maybe 3 lenders that I know that do that. And them being the only one that have actually closed. So that'll tell you something about the programs.
So, but the difference is, what about the flexibility? What kind of credit?
Can I answer that for you?
Yeah, please.
But it hasn't worked with all. One is the process. So what you see nowadays, especially in the microwave society that we live in technology, you're big box lenders, if you will. I'm not naming names because we work with them. But you're going to work with probably anywhere from 10 to 12 people just on the lending side alone. It's in a very assembly-like process. Whereas the credit union, I don't want to get into pay structure, but their loan officers aren't commission driven, right? So the service is going to be different in that aspect because they're not going to try to sell you something that you don't need, because they're going to make the same regardless. They're going to spend the time with you. I think the member retention on loans, we were just talking about this before, is we closed parents and then 5, 6, 7 years later closed their children after college. So I'd say service is number one. And second, if you look across the board, credit unions, for that exact reason of not being commission-based on loan officers, are typically anywhere to a quarter to a half a point lower. The program Jeff was mentioning earlier that he was modest on about the zero down. I would tell you in, 100 to 150 transactions a month, there's probably 2, maybe 3 lenders that I know that do that. And them being the only one that have actually closed. So that'll tell you something about the programs.
So, but the difference is, what about the flexibility? What kind of credit score are you looking at?
Yeah, and that's where I was going to follow on, is that, look, I mean, the reality of where we've come as a country, coming from the financial crisis, and as a mortgage industry, there's been this urge or reaction to put everybody in the box, right? So you're either in or you're out. And if you're squarely in the middle, obviously you've got a lot of different options. You can play them all off against each other. Everyone's going to tell you they have great service. I certainly appreciate my friend here pump us up, and I like to think that we live up to that. But the reality is, every lender you're going to talk to is going to say, "Hey, we're all service focused." The difference that we can do is that, you know, it sounds a little cliche, but we know our members. I said it before, I glossed over it. We like to say there are no non-starters, or at least very few. That doesn't mean we can always say yes. I wish we could. But what we try to do is we try to stay away from saying no, and we say not now. So if it's a not now, let's give you a plan. We may give you homework and say, okay, here's what we want to see in the next 30, 60, 90, in some cases 2 years. And that kind of ties back to, even if you feel like you're not quite there yet, and this is down the road, let's have the conversation now, because A, it could be a lot sooner than you think, and B, let's find out where the potential pitfalls are and potholes are, and let's fix them while we can, not when we're all panicked and stressed. I'd love to say that everyone, when the transaction is fun, don't hear that we're quite as like.
No disrespect to the agent side, but you're not going to find many brokers that are giving up 20% to work with them. It doesn't happen. I mean, there's only 2 institutions out there that I know personally that even have that type of program. So that, with lower rates, the services you mentioned earlier, even if it's for the 20%, I mean, let's say that amount saves you $10,000, it's $10,000 in closing costs. I don't care if it's $10, you know. So it's a stressful process. There's a lot to download, but you know, the main focus is you don't have to. Everything that we've said today, you're not doing alone. You're not on an island figuring it out yourself. You might get down that road and they're going to give you sound advice to say, let's hold off for 6 months, or let's do X, Y, Z to get you to a better rate, or let's try this program. Whereas what will happen with the big box lenders and the traditional brokers is they're incentivized to sell one program. So that 15-year fix might yield them a 10% increase in commission. And that's just honest to God truth. And so you might end up with a loan that really doesn't fit your needs. You know, so hope that answers. Okay.
All right. Well, are there any more questions? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. We greatly appreciate you spending the evening with us. Again, we're still going to be here for a few minutes. Thank you on Facebook Live for tuning in. And please join us next month for our retirement roundtable on March 22nd. That's a Wednesday evening. It's the 4th Wednesday. Hence the 4th Wednesday seminar series. So thank you for coming, everyone. Have a great evening.